The story is told of a train accident that happened in the 1800s. It was early 1900s. Early 1900s, just out of the turn of the century. And this train accident happened in Chicago. It was a cargo train that ran into a passenger train, as you can see here. This is an example, not the actual accident itself. But as train accidents go, the engines and the first cars in the train are usually pretty mangled, and the ones that are farther back, well, they stop fast, but they're still on the tracks. And so what happened is there was a Red Cross nurse in one of the back cars of the train, and she got out and she started helping individuals along the way. And as she came along, she noticed a well-dressed gentleman standing next to one of the cars of the train near casualties and people that are really significantly injured. And he's just standing there almost in a daze, and she recognized him. He was a famous surgeon from Chicago and had worked in one of the hospitals that she worked in as well. And so she went up to him and she shook him, and when she did so, he turned to her and said, "My instruments," and then kind of shook out of his daze, and she said, "Come on, help me. Why are you just standing there? Help me help them." And nurses tend to be a little bit more practical than doctors are. And so anyways, he went around and they're doing the little that they can here and there with these, people that are injured, and whoever in this process was going to died, and those certain ones that were helped and so on. And when the whole event was over, she ran into him again and she asked him, "Why were you just standing there, and what was that about my instruments?" And he says, "Oh, I didn't realize that I said anything. I was just I'm a surgeon and I do surgery, and I was just standing there and I was thinking, my instruments, if I only had my instruments, I could save them." God says the same thing. My instruments. If I only had my instruments, I could comfort them. I could encourage them. I could put my arm around them. I could bring them through. But you are my arm. You are my voice. You are my comfort. And I can only do that for them when you do that for them. My instruments. If I only had my instruments. Will you be an instrument for God? Will you allow Him to use the sufferings in your life that He has brought you through to become the ministry of your life to others? Will you? Or will you try to bury it and ignore the fact that you had gone through those things and not let anybody know and never use it? Are you going to bury your talent? Or are you going to use it and multiply it? God never leads His children otherwise than they would choose to be led if they could see the end from the beginning and discern the glory of the purpose which they are fulfilling as co-workers with Him. Not Enoch, who was translated to heaven, not Elijah, who ascended in a chariot of fire, was greater or more honored than John the Baptist, who perished alone in the dungeon. Unto you it is given in the behalf of Christ not only to believe on Him, but also to suffer for His sake. And of all the gifts that heaven can bestow upon men, and I know I turned it blank, I did it on purpose. Of all the gifts that heaven can bestow upon men, what would you ask for? What would you ask for? Of all the gifts that God could bestow upon men. All right, let's go back to it. Fellowship with Christ in His sufferings is the most weighty trust and the highest honor. It's not the gift we would have asked for, but it's the most weighty trust and the highest honor that He could give. There's a promise in the Bible, 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, "No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to men, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it." Now, that word temptation can be replaced with a number of things. Not just temptations, but trials. Not just trials, but sufferings, and so on. There is no suffering that has overtaken you except that it's common to men. Others have suffered the same way. They've gone through the same stuff. You're not the only one. You're not alone. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to suffer beyond what you are able. So let me ask you this. If you have a very weak person and a very strong person, and God promises that you will not suffer more than what you are able, who can suffer the most? It's the one who's the strongest. It's the one that's the strongest that can suffer most. So rather than thinking that you are the weak one, the refuse, because you have been through so much suffering in your life, you've gone through this and that and the other thing and so on and so forth, and it seems to chase you everywhere, and you have just been one pile of suffering after another. Recognize this, it's the strongest who can suffer the most. Now, when we consider the surgeon, and the surgeon using the knife, or whatever instrument that they use in surgery, what instrument can they use the best? Well, it's the instrument or the instruments that they use in every surgery. The surgeon always uses the knife, and they always use the sutures. Yeah, there's suture holders and a few other things that are very common. There's some surgeries where you only have one instrument for one part of one surgery and one part of the body, and that's the only time you ever touch that instrument. But every surgeon uses a knife. Every surgeon uses sutures. Right? So the instrument that God can use best is the one that He can use in the most different surgeries, in the most different circumstances and situations. So the one who has suffered the most is the one that He can use the best. Let me repeat that. The one who has suffered the most is the one that He can use the best, and they are the strongest. So rather than seeing suffering as the curse of your life, see it for the real blessing for what it is.